The question of services, services mode 5, quite new. It's services related to goods. And we made a study on that, and I give immediately Marina Foltea the floor for 10 minutes to present the study. Please.
So the purpose of the study was indeed to look at the mode 5 of services. And when we say mode 5, we mean those services which are increasingly traded as part of or linked to the goods by non-services sectors. And this is the case for the case for the manufacturing and the services they've been using increasingly lately. And here we talk about financial services, transport, logistics, software, R&Ds, environmental services. And the center of that, or the phenomenon which drives that, is the servicification, which we heard a lot about recently, and the policy questions which people ask around this, this phenomenon. And these services, they are used by manufacturing, in manufacturing, both in the primary sectors and the industrial sectors. And they are used as inputs in the production. They are linked to goods and presented as bundled goods. And these are also services which are available in-house, are provided by firms, or actually being outsourced or offshored. So the mode of trading these services together with the good, we are referring to it as mode 5 of services. To give one example, here we see a car, which we all know what it is, and we see a number of specifications of that car, and when we look at it, we will see that it has a sensor almost anywhere for just enabling its self-driving feature. And of course, when we speak about importing a car like that, we'll understand clearly that its value actually is comprised of, its value depends very much on services, and it's very high in services content and software. So it's a very sophisticated product, and the policy question which arises, do we then treat this product as a good when it comes at the border, or as something else? Interestingly, though, other examples which link to more traditional fields, we have, for example, the logs, which apparently contain more than 50% of the of its value, of their value, is represented by services. And here we have the loading, the harvesting, the tracking, the marshalling of the port, the fumigation. So imagine just a simple log. We see it as a very simple product, just a tree which has been cut, but the value of services in that good is actually very high. And another study conducted in Asia finds the same picture, or the same situation for the loaf of bread. Imagine that in order to produce a loaf of bread, 30 different services are being used, with a total value of the services exceeding 72% of the bread. So what is this worth when we look at the value of the services? So if we want to take policy actions, we certainly have to understand what is the value entailed in this segment of trade. And some studies show that the mode 5 are responsible for 20 to 47% of share of output by sector. And a scenario, in a multilateral liberalization scenario, This is a scenario whereby these products would not pay import duties. We have estimates of 300 billion euro as gains in GDP by 2025, and we have world trade to rise by 500 billion euro. All countries are to benefit from a multilateral liberalization here. More gains may be seen there for developing countries, Asian region, and goods manufacturing and business services are to benefit most, according to this study. And of course, importantly, the jobs, 40% of goods supported jobs in the EU are linked to Mode 5, but that's not only about jobs and economic welfare. There are wider policy implications, and this feeds into the Europe 2020 strategy, where we speak about smarter, greener, and more inclusive economies. Here we speak about giving more opportunities to environmental goods and services. Definitely SMEs who are participants, active participants on this segment, and enhanced export capability and total factor productivity. So what are the challenges then linked to Mode 5? Why are we talking about it? The challenges are, as I said, this is not a mode of supply which is recognized under the GATS. We don't have a definition actually anywhere for that. As a result, the transactions the import transaction, export transaction, which you see, they're actually subject to tariff barriers or quotas as applicable for goods. And that also to be squared with the scenario when rules of origin in FTAs favor mostly the country of assembly, which doesn't always correspond to the highest input value into the products. This obviously penalizes services value added exports, and it does penalize the European exports as well, or the European brains. The key findings, though, that we should turn then the attention to liberalization of trade in goods to reflect Mode 5 concerns, at least on the short term. If we aim at more ambitious solutions, we should not exclude also the possibility of negotiating global value chains at WTO, which will include more provisions, not just liberalizing Mode 5, but freedom of capital and movement to be considered at that level as well. And definitely working at this stage, we can work, given that we don't have a definition, actually, we need to work on it. The suggestion of the report is to define Mode 5 services as services added or linked to goods whose value on origin can be detected for customs valuation of the relevant goods, if we stay in the goods area. A few options which had been mapped out for in the study. We looked at the WTO or multilateral options and bilateral options, like what can be done at WTO, what can be done in the bilateral, in the FTA context. We found several options, like the first one, customs value deduction. There is a provision in the customs valuation treaty, the WTO, which actually allows deducting services from the value declared in the customs, thereby resulting in paying lower duties. We have the pros and cons of this. This provision actually is quite limited. It was not fought for liberalizing services. We have an carrier media exception, which we may find inspiration from that one. Interestingly, the harmonized system is not, it's run by World Customs Organization. There we can find some solution in how to reflect Mode 5. And finally, as I said, a comprehensive GVC treaty, Global Value Chain Treaty, can be a longer-term solution we are thinking about multilaterally. And customs deduction, if it doesn't work at WTO, we can work it out in bilaterals easier, as well as a bilateral option would be introducing a secondary rule of origin, which would account for this situation. And finally, the recommendations improve the definition of Mode 5 services. We need to understand better what this is and how to define it for policy and rules purposes. Develop additional economic analysis for the EU and beyond. Importantly, setting up a Mode 5 experts group, given the high technicality of the discussion here, and drive awareness of the private sector and of the countries who may want to support it. Important to cooperate with other organizations which already have done something in this field and map out possible implementation issues under the preferred or selected options. On research, certainly this is just an initial step, this report. We need more sectorial studies beyond the loaf of bread and the car we saw and the iPhone. We need further assessment of gains for the developing countries, since they may not be so immediately receptive to the idea. And we need to map out the possible GVC treaty under the WTO multilaterally, either in the WTO or even outside it, if the conclusion is that we cannot move on due to its decision making. And that has been all on my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Very interesting, specifically regarding the digital development, and the autonomous car might be one of the key elements for discussing Mode 4 further. 2 minutes for the Commission to react. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first welcome the initiative by the INTA committee to have a formal discussion on Mode 5. I think it is an important discussion to have for many reasons. It is an important, Mode 5 is an important driver of European competitiveness. Whether we fully understand it or not, that would be, of course, subject to many discussions and many fine-tuning of our nitty-gritty policy options. I would also like to congratulate the author of the report for a very comprehensive and balanced report. I think we have plenty of concrete policy options in front of us, some of them more ambitious, some of them less ambitious, but at the end of the day, all with a promising economic impact on a number of our key stakeholders. One thing that perhaps should be stressed from the outset is that there is clear interest from a number of European exporting sectors to make progress on Mode 5, not just from the European services producers, but also from a number of key European industrial sectors who depend on their external competitiveness also on the quality of Mode 5 services. And if they continue to pay duties on one of their key competitive advantage, it's not hard to understand why that's far from optimal. I would also like to perhaps stress 2 points that were very well explained in the report, but perhaps they're worth emphasizing. The first point is that although it sounds like a new concept, Mode 5 concrete provisions in our trade rules is not really pie in the sky. Mode 5 rules have been applied by EU custom officials for the last 30 years on imports. So we have well-trusted procedures at every single checkpoint in Europe, at all custom points where European custom officials can actually deduct the value of Mode 5 services if they qualify with that article from the custom valuation agreement. So it's easy to perhaps think of a small improvement in the way you do it by extending it to exports. And the second point is that even though perhaps at multilateral level it's hard to promote this idea, given that it would be beneficial for the whole world, I think it's important to first showcase this possibility in an FTA, that's the low-hanging fruit, and then see where that leads us. Thank you.